This is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us on this Friday night. I'm Russ Riesinger. It's a big problem that destroys a lot of lives in Montana and across the nation. According to the CDC, Montana ranks above the national average per capita for alcohol-impaired driving deaths. The Yellowstone County DUI Task Force aims to change that for alcohol and drugs. Q2's David J. has more on the very first Big Sky Drug and Alcohol Symposium that wrapped up today.
Russ, the plan was to have this last year, but because of COVID, it had to be canceled. So they brought it back this year. It was really important for them to all come together and meet in person and talk about the issues.
This is the 2021 Big Sky Drug and Alcohol Symposium being hosted by the Yellowstone County DUI Task Force. The focus that we put on was enforcement, prevention, and treatment. So the goal of the task force is to eliminate impaired driving incidences, specifically fatalities. The goal with this conference was to bring good training into Montana, because you have to go to Washington, D.C. for national conferences, Nashville, things like that. But why not have one here in Billings, Montana for our people?
Lieutenant Robert Lester is with the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office and is chair of the Yellowstone County DUI Task Force. He says the symposium will bring some good information to the nearly 170 who attended.
So this training here provides people with what to look for, current drug trends, what's happening in our community and nationwide with the drug trends. Like right now, Dr. Siddick's talking about how alcohol affects eye movements and why officers do the finger test, things like that.
And the lieutenant says dealing with DUIs is getting more challenging.
Fighting impaired drivers is a challenge that we've been facing since the creation of alcohol and vehicles mixing together. I mean, we've already had people, driving under the influence of methamphetamine, marijuana, alcohol, but now with the legalization, we're planning to see a spike in impaired driving.
We are trying to look for people who are under the influence of something other than a drug.
If you don't plan ahead, you go out, you start drinking, decision-making changes, you decide to drive home. We want you to plan. If you know that you're going to do that and you have a plan in place, hey, my ride's here, it's 10 o'clock, I got to go, it's time to go. We don't want you getting behind the wheel and driving.
Lieutenant Lester says a lot of this will depend on education, and that's the important part, to teach people about the problems with drinking and driving under the influence. Russ?
All right, thanks, David. Lester also says parents can be a big part of teaching about impaired driving. The symposium brought together those working in law enforcement, therapy, and other professions dealing with drugs and alcohol. Well, a woman charged as an accomplice in the murder of a Sheridan, Wyoming man who'd been camping out while in business in Billings was in court today. Christina Chavez pleaded not guilty in the death of 33-year-old Dennis Gresham. Chavez and Michael McClure were seen on surveillance video approaching the van and driving off before eventually crashing on Billings West End with Gresham's dead body inside. Chavez was arrested then, but McClure fled, broke into a home, and got into a standoff before finally killing himself. A Wyoming FedEx driver accused of driving distracted and killing a 23-year-old woman is now being charged. More than 5 months after the December 2020 crash, 53-year-old Todd Kohler has been charged with misdemeanor homicide by vehicle. He was booked into the Sheridan County Jail on Tuesday, entered a not guilty plea on Thursday, and is out on a $200 cash bond. Court documents state that 23-year-old Shariah Harper died when Kohler crashed into the back of her SUV going 60 miles per hour north of Sheridan. He told troopers he was distracted by the GPS device used to make deliveries. Kohler could spend up to a year in prison and pay a $2,000 fine for Harper's death. A Wyoming state senator now running for the U.S. House is playing political defense today. State Senator Anthony Bouchard is a top challenger to Representative Liz Cheney in the Republican primary. Yesterday, he posted a video on Facebook admitting to having sex with a 14-year-old girl when he was 18. Bouchard said he came forward with the information because of dirty politics.
It's amazing that they look at things so negatively. So bottom line, it's a story when I was young, 2 teenagers, girl gets pregnant. You've heard those stories before. She was a little younger than me, so it's like the Romeo and Juliet story.
Bouchard said they got married when she turned 15 and she delivered a baby boy. The marriage ended in divorce, and the woman then took her own life when she was 20. Bouchard said he's not intimidated by this information being brought to light. Montana U.S. Senator John Tester toured Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls with the Air Force Chief of Staff and head of Global Strike Command today. They talked about threats around the world, visited a missile launch facility, the weapons storage facility, and the building that will house the new helicopters the base is expected to get. They also met with some missileers.
As has been pointed out many times, this was Kennedy's ace in the hole during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We need to make sure that we are up to par with, and actually better than what is happening in China and Russia in particular.
Well, Tester is the chairman of the Senate Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, which provides around $700 billion a year for the Department of Defense and other agencies. Montana unemployment ticked down again in April. State unemployment levels last month matched the pre-pandemic level of 3.7%, nearly 2.5% lower than the national rate. While unemployment has reached the level it was before the pandemic, officials noted there are 9,400 fewer Montanans in the workforce compared to February of 2020. According to the state, the labor force added more than 1,400 workers in April. Those gains were driven by people returning to work as the COVID-19 vaccine became more widely available. And now turning to Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh in the Weather Center. And today the story is cold and snow. But on this date 5 years ago, the headline was wind and hail.
That's right. We had a huge storm that moved through the Billings area and through Yellowstone County and the surrounding region. Here's that radar loop from back on that day. As you could tell by the clock, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It rolled through Billings. A lot of folks were filing insurance claims not too long after that as that storm moved through. Here's some of the hail video that was shared to us from that day. Up to 2-inch diameter hail, wind gusts 66 miles an hour is recorded at the Billings Airport on that day 5 years ago. And we also saw some strong straight line winds around Hysham. And it wasn't but a few weeks later that we had a tornado in Baker in Fallon County. Come back and take a look at the forecast details coming up in just a little bit.
All right, thank you, Ed. Bighorn County's Public Health Board is rescinding its current mask order, not because the threat of COVID is waning, but because of the threat of a loss of American Rescue Plan Act funding that's being doled out by the state. It all has to do with House Bill 632 that lawmakers in the Republican-dominated legislature passed this spring, which cuts ARPA allotments to Montana counties that keep COVID restrictions in place that are stronger than at the state level. A news release states that jeopardizing funding was the only reason for the move, stating our county could lose 20% of that funding, including funding for infrastructure and broadband and many other non-health care items if the mask mandate remains in place. Bighorn County Health Officer Dr. Carol Greiman told me this afternoon that they didn't see a choice and that it's bizarre that one of the counties hit the hardest by COVID would have been penalized the most. She continues to urge everyone to get vaccinated and social distance. New updates tonight on the proposed medical school for West Billings as top officials with Rocky Vista University now say their construction plans are moving full steam ahead. Our own Jay Cohn has the latest on this development.
In spite of a rocky start to its proposal to build an osteopathic medical school in West Billings, Rocky Vista University officials say they plan to turn dirt on the project very soon. Provost David Forstein telling MTN News today he anticipates the framework of the building should be in place by December.
I just ordered a couple $1 million worth of steel, and we're closing on the property on the west end, getting ready to go. It's a more than $100 million investment to get this project started.
Rocky Vista's Billings campus would be the company's third school in the Rocky Mountain region, joining existing locations in Colorado and Utah. The privately funded project means big bucks for the Billings economy, an estimated $78 million impact over its 2-year startup, as many as 350 jobs, and more than $1.2 million in additional local taxes. While its economic impact would be huge, the school has battled controversy from the beginning. Billings Clinic pulled out of the project after inappropriate comments came to light from 2 of the school's representatives. And just 2 weeks ago, 50 Montana doctors signed a letter opposing the project.
I can understand that there may be some people who don't know us very well, who don't completely understand what our project is about, and there's always going to be fear and concern of the unknown. So I'm very eager to look forward to the opportunity to meet with these physicians and other leaders who have some of these concerns.
Rocky Vista anticipates its first class of some 80 students to be here in July of 2023. The first round of clinical rotations beginning in the summer of 2025. In Billings, I'm Jay Cohn reporting for MTN News.
All right, thank you, Jay. Earlier this week, Rocky Vista University announced it had been accredited from the Commission of Osteopathic Medicine, considered crucial in getting that project off the ground. Still to come on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, graduation day, but this one involves hard hats instead of caps and gowns. We'll dig up the proof behind Build Montana's success coming up next. Then a little later in sports, Racing for State will take you to the Eastern AA track and field divisionals coming up in just a bit.